Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tiffany and I talk all things quilting, specifically geared towards beginner quilters. Today we are launching or embarking on week 5 of our Around the Block quilt series. We're going to be working on the Friendship Star quilt or Friendship Star quilt block. And that block looks like what you're seeing here on camera. It consists of 9 squares, 4 of which are half square triangles. So for today, what we're going to be doing are 5 different blocks that measure at 4.5 inches squared. And then of course, the half square triangles will also measure at 4.5 inches squared. We're going to create the half square triangles using the 2 at a time method. So we're going to use 5-inch squares to create those, and then we'll trim them down to 4.5 inches. If you've been following along with us, hopefully you've already downloaded a copy of the tracker. You probably can't see this very well. Here is a view of it. It's just a simple tracker to help us to keep track of where we are week over week. And again, this week we're working on the Friendship Star block. Last week we did the half square triangle pinwheel block. And if you recall, last week we made our half square triangles doing the 4 at a time method. So this time we're going to do the 2 at a time, which is your basic or standard way of doing the half square triangles. I'm going to start this video by cutting my material, which is different than what we've done in the past weeks where we started with our material cut. So again, this week we're going to have our 4 corner blocks are going to be the same color, and they're going to measure at 4.5 inches squared. We'll have our center block that measures at 4.5 inches squared, and then we'll have our half square triangles that will form the points of this Friendship Star. So grab your materials and let's get started. Okay, so I have decided that I'm going to have a solid color for the actual Friendship Star. So I'm going to use this material here as the mating pair for the half square triangle, and then of course the corner blocks. So again, this square or this block uses 4.5 inches square triangle. So I am going to, not triangles, 4.5 inch squares. I'm going to fold this material so that I'll do 2 at a time. Okay, and I have my trusty 4.5 inch squared Creative Grids ruler that I'm going to be using to measure this square. Okay, so let's go ahead and cut this and probably save a little bit more material. Okay, I don't know that that's made much of a difference, but okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut these 2 squares out. Okay, so we have 2 of the 4 corner blocks that we're going to need cut, and then we'll cut the next 2. We'll use the same method of folding the material over. This is, you know, as you can see, it helps you because you are cutting 2 squares at a time. I'm just going to cut this piece here, and I'll save it for scraps. And let's get 2 more 4.5 inch squared blocks. Okay. So I'm using scrap materials. If you can't tell that, you can do the same, or as I mentioned in one of the previous videos, because our intention is to create a full quilt once we've completed all 12 blocks, you may want to give your the material that you're using for this series a little bit more thought, so that in the end you have blocks that are coordinated in terms of their coloring. Okay, so here are, now I have the 4 corner squares. And so now I need to create or cut the squares that are going to be used to make the half square triangles. And again, we're going to cut that larger. They need to be cut at 5 inches, and then we'll trim them down to 4.5. So I'll need to get more of that material. Okay, so this is the kind of lime green color that we're using for the half square triangle, or for the friendship star. This is a 5-inch ruler, so I'm going to cut my 2 squares that I'll be using to make the half square triangles, and then I'll also need to cut a 4.5-inch square that will be used for the center square of this friendship star block. Okay, so I have 2 squares that are going to be used to create 4 half square triangles, and I need to go ahead and cut the center for this star, so that's 4.5 inches. Oh, this is not on video, so let's move the camera back a little. Okay, that's a little better. Okay, so this is my 4.5-inch square that I will be using for the center block. A piece of that material. I'll lay this out and lay this other piece over it. And I'll try to start from the edge, so I'm saving as much material as possible. And we're going to go ahead and just cut the 2 5-inch squares that we're going to use to make our half square triangles. Okay, so we're all set with the material. Everything is cut. And then we can go ahead and get started with our actual sewing. So if you recall from other videos, when you're making half square triangles with 2 pieces of material, what you want to do is to lay them together, right sides together. And so I'm just lining them up here, making sure the corners meet. Let's smooth this out a bit. Okay, now I want to flip it over so I can look at this side here. So I'm lining up the squares, right sides together. And I'm going to then draw a diagonal from corner to corner. So I'll do them one at a time. Okay, so I'm going to just line up this ruler here and scoot this over so you can see it. We're going to draw a line from corner to corner. Corner to corner. And you want to be gentle when you're doing that so that you're not stretching the material. If you would like to do so, you can go ahead and pop a few pins in here. Particularly, it's helpful if you're going to not do this one at a time, so that when you're moving the material, setting it aside, you're not messing up the alignment that you've already created. So let's go ahead and just pop 2 pins in here. And we're going to take our second set of 5-inch squares and do the same thing. And then once we have them both prepped, we're going to sew a 1/4-inch line or 1/4-inch seam on both sides of this line. So let's go ahead and do the second square. Again, we're lining up our pieces, and then we're going to draw a line down the center. Okay, so I'm going to put 2 pins in here as well. Now, again, this is not a step that's necessary, but we'll do it just so that we are sure we don't move the fabric. Okay, so then we'll take both of these squares to our sewing machine. And again, we're going to sew a 1/4 inch away from that line on both sides. Okay, so we're just lining up our material here. You want to have the line that you've drawn just bumping up against your presser foot. So we're going to line up the line that we've just drawn on our materials with the presser foot, and then we're going to sew down both sides of it a 1/4 inch away. So we have that on one side, the line sewn a 1/4 inch away from our drawn on line, and now we'll do the same on the other side of the line. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is take our squares to our cutting board, and then we're going to just cut right along that line that we've drawn on so that we separate this square into our 2 half square triangles. So you can line your ruler up on the 1/4 inch mark, which if you've sewn carefully should be just on the line there. If it's not, don't stress about it, because again, we're going to trim the half square triangles to the size that we need. Okay, so here's 2 half square triangles, and here are our second 2. Again, just lining up the 1/4 inch line on one of the lines that you stitched on, and then you're going to cut. So as you can see, we now have 4 half square triangles. I'm going to press mine open with the seams open. You can either do open or to one side, whatever is your preference. and then we'll take it over to the iron and then actually press them flat with a hot, dry iron. I'm going to just take these 4 to the iron and press them, and then we'll come back and trim them. Here are our pressed half square triangles, so now we're going to trim them down to size, and that size is the 4.5 inches squared to match our corner and center block. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this with 2 different rulers. One being a ruler that is actually 4.5 inches squared exactly. So we're just going to line this up on the diagonal line there, and then we're going to trim. So you can see that using the 5-inch square blocks to begin with, your half square triangles aren't very much bigger, but you do have room to trim, so that's good. Okay, so here's our first trimmed half square triangle. Now we're going to do trim one of the half square triangles using the 5-inch square ruler. So this ruler is a little bit larger than the half square triangle that we want to end up with. But again, we're just going to align this 45-degree line on the diagonal of our half square triangle. And we're going to trim off as little as possible because we just want to create 2 straight edges. And then we'll flip this around and trim the rest of the half square triangle so that it measures 4.5 inches. So again, we're going to take the diagonal, and this is, so again, there's not a whole lot to trim, but you want to just align the 2 edges that your straight edges with the 4.5 inch mark on your ruler. And hopefully you can see this is a 5-inch ruler, and I have the 1/2 inch lined up on the HST, and now I'm just going to trim the other side. Okay, and so now we have 2 perfectly trimmed 4.5 inch half square triangles, and then we'll just do the last 2, and we'll be in position to start putting together the actual block that we're working on today. Okay, so we have all of our half square triangles trimmed now. So let's go ahead and lay out the block, and then we can start sewing. So now we have it laid out correctly. So if you've been following us, you know in week 2 we did the 9 patch. So this now essentially becomes just a 9 patch, right? So we have our 9 squares that we're going to sew together, and then we will be done with today's block. Okay, so I am going to do this. How do I want to do this? So I'm going to do this, these 2 rows together, or columns, I'll sew them together first. So this column to this column, and then I'll come back in and add the last piece for each of the rows. So we're going to just line up our corners and then sew with a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so now we're going to just add on the third column for each of these rows. Okay, so the star block is coming together. I have each of the 3 rows sewn together. And so now I'm going to press the seams open, going up each side here, and then I will iron them flat with a hot dry iron, and then we'll sew the rows together, and then we'll be done. Okay, so we have all 3 rows. They are, the seams are pressed flat. So now we're going to sew the rows together. And to do that, we're going to, and I didn't mention, but I press my seams open. You can, of course, press yours to the light or dark side, whatever your preference, or press them open. So now I'm going to pin each of the rows together. So you just want to line up your seams and then pin them. If I can try to get a good view of that on camera. So lining up the seams there, and then I'm just going to stick a pin right in here and do the same for the other side. Stick a pin. And I'm also going to pin the other side together now as well. So let's line that up. And we're going to pin these together. I like to press my seams open because I can see much better whether or not they're lined up. I know people like to press them from one side or the other, and then they're able to nest the seams. That does not work very well. For me, I generally end up with a gap still. When I press them open and then pin them this way, I very rarely end up with a gap. Okay, so now both sides are pinned, and we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew down both sides. Okay, so here is our completed friendship star block. This is week number 5, so hopefully you can see that, and that was pretty easy tutorial to put together. So you just need to have your 4.5 inch squares for your corners, 4.5 inch square for your center, and then for your half square triangles, you're going to want to start with a 5 inch square, 2 5-inch square squares, and then you're going to line the right sides together and make your half square triangles, and then ultimately trim them down to a 4.5 inch square to match your corner pieces and your center. And then from there, it's really just a 9 patch. So you'll just go ahead and piece the 9 squares together. And in this case, you end up with the friendship square. So hopefully you've enjoyed our video. Please, if you haven't already done so, make sure you go back and look at the previous week's video so that you can catch up with us. Next week, we are working on a churn dash block. So it also has half square triangles. I think next week we'll go back and do the half square triangles 4 at a time. So I want to keep alternating between the methods just so that you know that you do have options and you get familiar with using both of those methods. Again, half square triangles are a staple in quilting. So if you can master that and find the way that works best for you, I think you'll really enjoy them. But thank you for joining us this week. We hope to see you next week when we're working on the churn dash block. Again, this is the Around the Block quilt series. Ultimate goal is at the end of the 12 weeks, we're going to piece all the blocks together and have a mini, well, not a mini, but a nice size quilt. So we look forward to seeing you next week. If you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. It's really the best way to help me grow here on YouTube, which is what I'm trying to do so that I can reach more new quilters and share more of my journey with more of you all. Again, hoping that it helps to progress you along your journey of quilting. So we'll see you next week where we're going to be working on the churn dash block. Thank you for joining and have a great day.